Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Can you hear me, first of all? I'm not sure. Yes. I'm curious as to, first, how do you make the case back at home to members of Congress that the shutdown hurts American security and potentially the security of its allies, while at the same time you are here presumably assuring those allies, at least in Asia, that you still have their back, like what you said? And secondly, how concerned are you that the perception of weakness created by the president's having to cancel his visit here, whether or not that's the reality, how concerned are you that that perception will encourage some countries in this region, notably China, but perhaps also Russia, to try and take advantage of the situation?
Well, Matt, it's a very good question. It's a fair question, and my answer is very straightforward. There are momentary disruptions. And a momentary disruption always has the ability to have an impact. I mean, if you are not funding a particular security operation at a particular moment, in the Sinai, for instance, or somewhere, there's an opportunity for mischief. And the other examples that I gave are self-explanatory. But that's not long-term. And I'm convinced it's not long-term. Now, I think it's reckless, personally, to even provide those moments where you have these risks that are exposed. But the bottom line is that the United States of America is not going to change one iota the fundamental direction of the policy under this president. And I think everybody in the region understands. I haven't run into one question mark about the long term. Everybody sees this as a moment of politics, an unfortunate moment, but they see it for what it is. But in the long run, I think people understand that on an issue like Iran with nuclear weapons, on an issue like North Korea and nuclear weapons, on our fundamental commitments to this region, in terms of maritime security and freedom of navigation through the seas and so forth, our commitment is not going to change, and the American people understand the importance of those commitments and will be steadfast. So I think I haven't found one leader here who raised a question with me about the long term for the United States. What they do ask is, how long is this going to go on, and why is this happening, and those kinds of questions. And I think that people understand that the fundamental commitment of the United States is what it is, and I think they still trust it. Now, with respect to the perception of, quote, weakness, I just disagree with that premise. I don't believe that anybody here believes there is some connection of any moment of weakness in the president making a decision to deal with his domestic politics. There isn't one leader here who wouldn't make the same decision if they were faced with a domestic moment in their politics where they have to resolve a budget or resolve a debt ceiling or any other kind of issue. But we just had a very strong meeting in Japan, Secretary Hagel and I. We just re-announced a next 15 to 20 year projected reevaluation of our guidelines for our relationship with Japan and in the region. Here in my conversations with the foreign minister from the Republic of Korea, we had the same kind of long-term horizon. And I think in the discussions that we've had in APEC about the code of conduct and the South China Sea and other issues, there hasn't been one doubt or one question asked about whether the United States will fulfill its obligations and remain engaged. So there is a distinction between short-term impact and I think the long-term interest that people perceive as being much more durable than any moment in our domestic political life.
Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Secretary. Where does Indonesia stand as an APEC member with America in playing a role to help to revive the global economy?
Well, I'm going to let the ambassador speak a little bit to that, but I will just tell you that Indonesia is growing at, I think, around 6% or so now. They have plans to even raise that level of growth more significantly. Indonesia is a very powerful, significant member of APEC, not just the chair this year, but one of the larger countries, one of the more important exporting nations, a country with enormous resources and capacity to contribute to the regional growth. And we view Indonesia as a very important partner in terms of adherence to rules and standards and to the rules of trade, which is so critical to transparency and accountability and to the willingness of people to invest capital and therefore grow economies. So Indonesia has proven itself to be a very significant partner with us in that regard, and I'll let the ambassador fill out perhaps a little more detail.
Well, the only thing I would add to that is Indonesia is one of the largest economies in the world and is a key member, for example, of the G20, and has played a critical role in the G20 in terms of bringing a perspective of an emerging economy to the global economic system and ensuring that issues were addressed in an appropriate way. They've been, President Yudhoyono and others from Indonesia played a critical role in the G20 over the last several years. And similarly, just 2 months from now, Indonesia will host and chair the 9th meeting of the WTO Ministerial. So it is playing a leadership role in the international trading system and is working very hard. That was a big topic of today's meeting, of today's discussions this morning. Working very hard, both with APEC members, but also with members from around the world to ensure a positive result for the multilateral trading system.
The final question will be from Indira Lakshmanan from Bloomberg News.
Thank you, Secretary Kerry and Ambassador Froman. Secretary Kerry, you addressed this a little bit at the top of your remarks, but the whole question about the government shutdown has certainly created a perception in Asia that it's undermining the president's ability to fulfill his Asia pivot promise. And we've heard this both in public remarks from certain Asian leaders and also private remarks that they feel it's undermining the president's what is meant to be his signature issue of his second-term foreign policy, distracting him. So I want to ask you, how can you reassure those leaders who've expressed their concerns that it's not undermining the Asia pivot? And secondly, also, how is it affecting, for both of you, the ability to get TPP talks done this week? Because again, we'd expected the president to be here and his leadership creates a message. So is it giving an opportunity for China or others to work on rival trade groups to the TPP? Thanks.
Well, Indira, I think I did touch on this a little bit, but let me fill it out a little bit more. President Obama is not here, and he planned to be here. And he is not here because he has to stay at home in order to deal with this domestic challenge, which has been presented to him by a small group of people within one branch of the United States Congress. That obviously undermines the president's ability to have the conversation he was going to have with President Xi, or have the conversation he was going to have with, or the meeting he was going to have with President Putin, all of which are important to the conduct of global affairs. So obviously there is the loss of that as a result of this. But I think those leaders, all of them, know well enough that in terms of the long term, this will end. And the United States will have a budget. And the United States will still be the strongest power in the world in terms of our military capacity, largest economy in the world, an economy that is now increasingly stronger by the day, a debt that is coming down, a deficit that's coming down, job growth that is robust, not as much as we want, but robust in the circumstances, and importantly, increasingly, an energy power in the world. Increasingly independent, I think I saw statistics just the other day that said we are now the largest oil and gas energy producer in the world. So that is not insignificant. And as the world takes stock of who stands for what and who's fighting for what and who's pushing what values, I believe the United States still stands tall and will not diminish one iota the influence or the direction that we are fighting to move in. So this is a momentary impact. Obviously, if it were prolonged or if it were repeated, people would begin, I think, to question the willingness of the United States to stay the course or its ability to. But that's not the case, and I don't think that will be the case. We will get beyond this moment. And the President wants Ambassador Froman and Secretary Pritzker and myself to make it clear to people that we remain as committed as ever to this robust shift in the Asia rebalance, and that's why the three of us are out here. And as I said, I just had a very successful 2+2 meeting, a meeting with the Defense Secretary and the Foreign Secretaries of Japan and the United States. We are now here. I'm not here for 5 hours. I'm not here for 1 day. I'm here for 5 days. And I go from here to Malaysia and to the Philippines and to Brunei, and all told, I'll be out in this part of the world for about, almost 2 weeks. So I think that is a significant statement about the United States presence, about the President's commitment, and I am absolutely confident that when we get this moment of political silliness behind us, we will be back on a track that the world will respect and want to be part of.
And Daryl, all I'd add on the TPP question is that, as Secretary Kerry indicated in other areas, this is a long-term engagement. The U.S., including the President, has been deeply engaged in this initiative from the start. It's a key part of our rebalancing agenda, the economic component of the rebalancing agenda. And we've been here for the last several days, meeting around the clock as ministers and negotiators, making significant progress on the negotiations. Of course, we wish the President were here to lead the meeting of TPP leaders later in the week. But Prime Minister Key of New Zealand has agreed to chair on his behalf, and the leaders are all looking forward to engaging in this issue because they know it's an important initiative and they very much see it as a key part of U.S. engagement in the region.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all very much. Good to be with you. Thank you.